Hello, everyone. Welcome to Random Encounter, episode 224. My name is Jonathan Logan, and I am not Greg Delmage. Yes, last week I told you that Greg was going to be back, and he's not. He's lost in the Bermuda Triangle. No, he's not. He just got a big promotion at work, and that is like completely awesome for him. But he is also running around right now trying to figure out his responsibilities, trying to figure out basically his job. And so he's going to be doing that. I might be with you for a few more episodes, solo hosting, but Greg will be back, and then we'll be back to your regularly scheduled programming. But at any rate, we have a fantastic episode for you today with some folks who haven't actually been on the show for a little while, and I am absolutely delighted to have them. First up is Abe Kobylanski. Abe, how you doing?
I am pretty good. How are you?
Oh, I'm fine. Last time you were on the episode was... about 20 episodes ago, or 12 episodes ago.
Yeah, it was a while ago.
Yeah, it was 12 episodes ago, and you were talking about a game that you didn't really love all that much, if I recall.
Yeah, I'm kind of sad to see how Outriders turned out. It was a game that had potential. It looks like it's kind of crashed and burned since then.
But thankfully, you're here, and you are going to be talking about two games that you actually did really enjoy, and that are really good.
This is true.
And also joining us for the first time in quite a while is Pete Leavitt.
Hello.
Hello, how you doing, Pete?
I'm great, man. I'm here. I'm ready to talk PlayStation. Shoot.
Yeah, PlayStation had a big week this week. They did a big presentation and everything, and we're going to talk about that just a little bit later because there is an awful lot of news to get into, a lot of it RPG related. But first, let me ask you how are you guys doing? How is life going in your respective parts of North America?
Well, I feel like I lived an entire life since the last time I was on this show.
It's okay, Abe. I feel like I lived an entire life since the last episode of this show.
Yeah, I got my vaccination. Went on vacation to Florida, first vacation in a couple of years because of the pandemic. Tried to learn to surf. Surfing is a lot harder than it looks. There's a reason why those surfer dudes are so ripped. You got to have a strong upper body to do it. I left my breakfast in the ocean, so that was my Florida vacation.
That's a lot of physical activity, man. That'll do it to you. Yeah, the ocean fights back.
Yeah. And then I've also moved into a house for the first time since I moved out of my parents' house a while ago.
Ooh, congrats!
Yeah,
that is huge news.
Not owners, but we live here.
You don't need to be owners; it's your home.
Yeah.
Did you get to? Well, you're in Florida. Just out of curiosity, because I apparently am a massive tourist. Did you get to Disney World?
I did not. Nope, didn't make it. We were in the Orlando area.
So your breakfast was only left in the ocean. It was not left on Pirates of the Caribbean.
We were going for a little bit of a cheaper vacation, and so the beach is a cheap vacation.
That sounds really relaxing and nice.
It was. Yeah, it sure was.
Cool. And Pete, how are you doing? What's going on in your neck of the woods?
A whole lot of what it was last time I was on. Just thankfully, still the barbershop is rocking and rolling, and we're actually really busy. I'm like at my peak right now, and I have one other barber with me, but he's pretty much at his peak too. So we're having to turn a lot of people away. I'm booked out like a month, which is nice. I'm very, very thankful, but it also sucks getting phone calls all the time and being like, yeah, I can take you in like 3 weeks. And they're like, oh,
but my hair's long now.
Right. So, but yeah, I mean, it's good. It just points to a lot of good fortune, thankfully, on our end. But like mostly that, like, just family and a lot of barbering, and seeing as I am a cool person, as much Genshin Impact as I can fit in that. But I'm joking. But other than that, yeah, trying to get some games in there, trying to read a book as well every now and again, trying to get a book in, but trying to enrich my life with stuff other than just work, but not always succeeding. But it's good. I can't complain.
I actually know what you're talking about. I just got back from Nova Scotia, and while I was in Nova Scotia, I was like, I'm going to get a haircut in Nova Scotia because it's safe there. And I called up every barbershop I could find, and they were like, yeah, we can see you in November. And I was like, okay.
But I got to record a podcast.
But no, I got back to Ontario, and there are many, many more barbershops. And there was one barbershop that is just downstairs from in my building, which is open on Mondays, which apparently is a bit of a rarity. And I got my first haircut in 2 years today.
Well, congratulations. That's almost as big a deal as Abe's house.
It might be a bigger deal depending on how long your hair was.
Yeah, it was a mess. I actually felt bad after he finished. I looked down. I was like, oh my God, you're going to need like 2 big mops to take care of this. Yeah,
the barbershop closed on Monday thing, man. Good old microeconomics. So it's not so much the case anymore. You see a lot more barbershops that closed on Monday is like a very traditional thing that's kind of like going away. But
it's a traditional thing in theater too. It's called Dark Day Mondays. Like whenever I was working in the theater, Monday would always be a dark day because
that's because you got to work on Saturday, baby. Barbers and theater people.
Yeah, you do 2 shows on Saturday and you do a Sunday matinee, and then you'd get like a day off just to recover from that 3-show nightmare. Yeah, but Monday was always the traditional day off.
In Ohio, everything's closed on Mondays, it seems like.
That would rock for me. I'm like, I got to run errands on Monday. Oh, everything's closed.
Sometimes you think about, where are we gonna get dinner today? Oh, everything's closed. We can't. It's like
we're having dinner here at the house.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you're both doing so well, and that professionally and in terms of getting a house, which is amazing. So let's do a little bit of talking about some video games that have come out recently. Abe, I wanted to talk to you about just last week we put up a review on the site for Black Book, and this is it's kind of like a roguelike, but it's a turn-based RPG, and it's kind of uses card-based mechanics, but kind of not. Like what? Tell us a little bit about Black Book. You really liked it. You gave it an 88.
I really did like it. It's interesting that I talked about how the genre is kind of it's kind of complicated to define. So if you've played roguelikes before and you just took a minute to sit down with Black Book and you took a glance at it, if you look at the map, the overworld map with with the dots on it, with encounters and such at each location, if you took a look at the combat, if you took a look at the deck building screen, you'd say this is a roguelike. It's a little bit different. One of the hallmarks of roguelike games is that they have kind of a sparse story. If you played like Slay the Spire or even Hades, which is the kind of the king of roguelikes right now, you would say that the story is kind of, certainly non-linear. Roguelikes, I think, have a fairly unique story structure from other RPGs.
Yeah, generally speaking, roguelikes are they can't have stories and they can't have very engaging characters, but they're also tremendously focused on the overall gameplay experience and the gameplay loop. And it has to be, because if it's not a good gameplay loop, literally it's dead.
Right. So Black Book, on the other hand, it places a heavy emphasis on the story. Is very very story driven game. That's how it feels much more like a traditional RPG. It's a very linear story. In a lot of roguelikes, you have like on your main map, you have your objective, and then you have several paths that lead to the main objective. In this game, you have one path that leads to your main objective. There are kind of opportunities to explore off the beaten path a little bit, but there's only one objective at a time. And so in a lot of roguelikes, if you lose the game, you get kicked all the way back to the beginning of the game. That's kind of a pure roguelike. In this game, that doesn't happen. If you lose, then you usually have the opportunity to just start over from the moment where you lost, whether it's in a battle or you pick the wrong choice in a conversation. That's something that can happen in this game. You can lose the game if you pick the wrong choice in a conversation.
Ooh.
This game is actually much more forgiving than roguelikes, and I think that's probably a good sign that this could be like a kind of a gateway game if you're kind of interested in roguelikes, but you're concerned about the backbreaking difficulty that they usually have. If you played something like Slay the Spire, it just feels extremely similar.
Yeah, I'm looking at some screenshots here, and it's it has that vibe.
Yeah,
well, I mean, it has that vibe with a much more macabre look to it.
Yeah,
a hopeless thing. I noticed that it's set at the late 1800s in Russia, on the cusp of the communist revolution, which is not necessarily the happiest of times.
Yeah, it's this is a dark fantasy game. The Black Book that is referred to in the title is it comes from like a sort of a satanic power. The main character has to make a deal with Satan in order to gain those powers.
As one does.
As one does, yes. Yeah, it is a fairly dark time. It's this is like pre-industry even.
My understanding is this is based on some kind of like Norse culture. Is that right? Did I get that
Russian?
Right? Dude, okay, you said Russian Revolution, the Communist Revolution.
Yeah,
sorry about that. Yes, got it.
That's the famous Communist Revolution in Norse mythology. I'd love the idea of there being like, what was it? That's why they called him the Red, Eric the Red. It was because he was a communist.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so it's drawing off of like some kind of Eastern European thing with some maybe like Christian idea of like hell and Satan.
Yeah, there's a lot of demonology. Very Russian Orthodox Church based folklore and mythology and legends and things like that.
Out of curiosity, how much? I mean, obviously, it's set in this period. Is there an element of historical fit? Like, does the location and the era impact the actual overall game? Are there worries in the land about the communist revolution, or is it just like that kind of a setting, or is it just people are really, really, really poor?
There actually are a lot of references to the communist revolution. It's a little bit subtle. I don't have a great grasp of Russian history. I started taking a class on Russian history in college once, but it was kind of one of those extra classes, and it came time for my term paper to be due, and I was just like, no, I'm done. I'm going to drop that one.
If you could only go back in time and be like, no, someday you're going to need to be on a podcast.
Right.
So let's dive into a little bit about the actual mechanics of the turn-based battles. So you mentioned it's a little bit like Spire in that it uses cards. So it's a deck build kind of RPG. How is it similar? How does it differ from Spire, would you say?
It's extremely similar to Slay the Spire. I haven't played a ton of that game, but I did play a little bit of it. And, the first tutorial, I sat down and tried it, and I was like, this is basically Slay the Spire. It's basically the same. I think that once you get out of kind of the first area of the game, I think it starts to find a little bit of its own footing in terms of how the mechanics work. There's a big emphasis on duration effects. There's an emphasis on building a big, massive, attack value or a big defense value in order to deal with the enemies properly.
I've played a few deck building RPGs. The only one I've really played was SteamWorld Quest, and I got to admit, I wasn't in love with the system there. It might have just been that game. It might not have been the overall system, because I never have played Spire. But I do know that like a lot of people are getting fairly... What was the name of the... There was a recent announcement about the big Marvel RPG that just got announced, and it's going to be using card-based mechanics. And people kind of freaked out a little bit about that. Midnight Suns, that's it. It's Marvel's Midnight Suns.
Yeah, Midnight Suns.
What is your take on card building mechanics in terms of how it works in an RPG?
I guess I haven't really ever been a big fan of card-based combat myself generally, but I was a Magic the Gathering player probably a couple decades ago, back when I was in high school, and this sort of card-based combat gives a very similar feeling to like the metagame within Magic the Gathering, of the strategy of building a deck that can handle certain enemies, handle certain attacks and things like that. If you play Magic the Gathering, there's always always new expansions that come out, and there's kind of excitement. I always had a kind of excitement of whenever a new expansion would come out, new cards, which means that you can work out new strategies, and it's always interesting to see what kind of new cards would come out. This game sort of has a similar season structure or expansion structure, and it gives a lot of the same feeling of diving into a new mess of cards and coming up with new strategies.
I like you mentioned, I haven't ever really been that big of a fan of deck building games or card based combat either. This looks really interesting because it's that mix of like Slavic myth, Orthodox Church, revolutionary, backdrop going on. So I mean, that's just cool and unique in itself. But there were a couple games that did make me kind of a believer, and that kind of make me all right with what's going on with Midnight Suns, and I might end up playing that game, I might not. We'll see. But that makes me more interested in this game, certainly. And that was Yggdrasil Union on the Game Boy Advance, which was like a turn-based tactics game like Fire Emblem, but it used cards really cleverly. And that was the first one I played where I was like, oh, okay, cards make sense, and this is cool. This isn't how I imagined it would be. And not long ago, we did a podcast on Baten Kaitos, which was a JRPG that used a totally card-based combat mechanic. That was also pretty fun. So recently, I've been made a bit more of a believer in that kind of thing. So this is really interesting. I might pick this up.
There are things that I really do like about the card game mechanics, one of which being that, yeah, you select your decks so you can select your attacks, but there still is that element of randomness that keeps you on your toes. So you can't just go into autopilot mode to grind or things like that. You always need to be paying attention to what you have to work with and the enemies, and basically deal a strategy that will work for each particular encounter.
And not to steer this too much into card-based mechanics generally, but like that does abstractly really play into the beat-by-beat narrative of the gameplay itself. Like if you take gameplay as its own type of narrative, if, let's just say, you were like battling a demon and you had other demons you were making deals with or whatever, and you had them certain attacks or certain abilities represented by cards, abstractly that could represent like any given situation in that kind of intense scenario that might make you have to switch up your approach based on your circumstances, just kind of like a top down, like abstract way. It can make a lot of sense thematically. And so it's pretty cool that, this isn't the first I've heard of it, but I've enjoyed listening to Abe talk in depth about it. I'm really interested in it now.
Yeah. I think that and it sounds very intriguing in terms of not just the setting, but also the story. It does not sound like what you would call a traditional RPG hero saves the day, selfless hero story. It sounds like you are, at one point in your review, which might be one of my favorite lines I've read in a review this year, you say, "There's always a weighty downside to being in league with Satan." True words.
Imagine that.
It never ends well for when you make a deal with the devil,
even if it's a cute cat.
Oh, that's a demon. That's a whole different story.
Oh, that's a demon. Okay, so
that's a good demon too.
I think something else I really like about the idea of card-based mechanics is that it gives you the potential for. You even mentioned it in the review here. You talk about how bosses are not so much just like grind fest or anything like that. There's a slight almost puzzle aspect to them.
Yeah, the bosses are much more puzzly than your standard enemies. Just the pattern of how they attack and use duration effects and how they use defense. It's gonna put you a little bit more out of your element than just the standard enemies. I often found that I would go and fight the boss, get my ass kicked, then have to go back and formulate a strategy. There was kind of a lot of trial and error to the boss fights, but it was a good challenge. It really forced me to go back and rethink my strategies, dig into the mechanics of the game that would be revealed over time throughout the game, and just come up with something that works. I often have to redo my entire deck to make it work.
Again, that's a strategy aspect of it. Yeah.
It made for a good challenge. I like that the game both forces you to dig into the newer mechanics that come out over time, but also, if you have a strategy that you like, you can often simply incorporate some of the new mechanics and simply adjust your preferred strategy. You can do things a little bit your own way, and also, you really need to dig into what the game gives you.
That's the tactics game, like magic formula, right? Like how much you just hard counter everything so that you make it just a puzzle, and how much do you allow for the flexibility of building organic tactics?
Yeah, so I thought it did a good job of allowing a bit more individuality for the player, but
you still have to pay attention.
Yeah, you got to pay attention.
That's cool.
I like that there is the possibility that you could come up with a deck that wouldn't be able to beat anything. So you do. This is definitely a thinker. You definitely need to have your thinking cap on to take on the enemies in this game.
And it also sounds like you not only have the usual turn-based combat, but you mentioned in the review there is something called Durak, a more strategic version of war.
Yeah, it would have been nice if one of the drawbacks of this game is that a lot of things just aren't explained particularly well, and Durak is unfortunately one of those. It's a game played with standard playing cards, and yeah, it's kind of like war, but with a little bit more strategy. It's a really interesting idea of playing a card game with demons for your soul. I just watched the Seventh Seal recently, and in that movie, a medieval knight plays a game of chess with death. It kind of gives that same narrative thematic feeling of playing a card game with demons with your soul at stake.
I recently rewatched Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, where they played Battleship with Death, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, I think this game sounds really cool. It looks really cool too. It has a very unique visual design, which I appreciate because not everyone can afford AAA level graphics. It's just impossible under budget. So what you can make up for it in striking visual design, and this game certainly looks like it has it.
Looks awesome.
Yeah, this game it's absolutely gorgeous. There's a lot of the elements, a lot of the environments feel like it kind of looks like a watercolor painting. A lot of the colors are kind of more muted, but that just makes the lighting effects and like smoke effects and things like that just really pop out.
There's a great era of like Soviet animation in like the 60s and 70s, and this reminds me of like an ultra refined version of that. I don't know how animated the images are when you're playing it, but it kind of looks like some of that old Soviet animation stuff. That's pretty cool.
It could be. That's not something I'm particularly knowledgeable about, but it sounds neat.
Yeah, the studio that developed it, Morteshka? What is it? I can't pronounce it. Morteshka, I guess. They are Russian based, so this is a Russian. Like it has to be authentic because it's based in Russia. Like they were able to pull from their own mythology and history in order to create this game, which is probably why it seems so authentic, because it is authentic.
Yeah, and I think that's an area of literature and folklore and myth that especially people in the West probably aren't particularly familiar with.
Yeah, it doesn't make it out here so much.
Yeah.
So the story has a pretty unique feel. There is a heavy religious aspect to it, but it doesn't feel like something you'd see in a religious story that was released in this half of the world. It feels very different.
How's the voice acting? Like you mentioned that it seems a little bit hammy. How's the overall sound design, like music, that kind of thing?
The music was really good from what I remember. It was a little bit subtle. It was a little heavy on the accordion. But it was good. I enjoyed it. One thing I really enjoyed was while you're exploring, sometimes you'll come across a group of young people who will want you to join them in a song, and then it'll throw in like what's probably some sort of Russian Orthodox hymn. I don't know if it was recorded like specifically for this game, or if they just bought a recording or whatever. But those songs are they're very stirring, and they fit extremely well with the graphical style. It just makes for a very spiritual moments.
That's really nice. You played with the English voice acting. Did you check out the Russian voice acting? Was it actually available?
It was. I thought the Russian voice acting sounded better probably, but it's one of those things where I probably played through about half of the game with the English acting, and then I I guess I should probably see how the Russian is too.
That's how I play a Yakuza game nowadays. I'm like playing it in Japanese, and I'm like, I should probably check the English.
But I feel like, once I start a story, I'm probably going to stick with whatever I started with.
Yeah.
Even though I probably prefer the Russian from the little bit I heard.
It seems like a very authentic game. It was created by a Russian studio. It's set there. There's something about the actual language being used, presumably with, hopefully a half decent subtitle translation, would just be a very authentic way to play the game.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of the voice actors did double duty. They did both the Russian tracks and the English tracks.
That's actually ridiculously impressive from an acting point of view.
Yeah, it is really. You'll hear some really strange pronunciations of some words that you wouldn't hear from a native English speaker. For instance, you talked about the cat. The word feline, they pronounce feline.
A feline?
I don't know of any accent that would pronounce that word that way.
Okay, I would say that feline is actually a fairly cute name for like a cat.
Yeah, I liked it. Yeah.
Like Feline the cat.
Yeah.
Actually, I do kind of like that. Well, it sounds like Black Book is a game that's really worth checking out, especially if you like card-based mechanics and this period of history. It's a lot of RPGs tend to put you into a very fantasy setting that may be inspired by various places, but aren't really those places. But this one takes place in a very definite time and really makes you feel like, I guess, you're there. And that's a really interesting choice that it sounds like really paid off for them.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, that's cool. There's we don't want to talk about it too much because this is the review that you did before this one, but it's a game that you didn't get a chance to come on random before, so I wanted to mention it to you. And that is Chernobylite, which is another game that has both Russian and English voiceovers, but very, very different games, maybe equally scary, but in very different ways. So why don't you tell us a little bit about Chernobylite? And you also loved it. You gave it another 88.
Or Chernobylite.
Chernobylite?
That would be the Russian pronunciation. I was saying that for weeks to myself because it's a really fun word to say. Yeah, I guess I kind of joke to myself that I have the European beat here at RPG Fan. I just
really do.
I seem to take on a lot of European games. It's not something I do consciously, but it just seems to turn out that way.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Farm 51 is located, I believe it's in Poland. So,
it's Polish, yeah.
Yeah.
So Chernobylite. So in Chernobylite, you play as Igor. He was a nuclear engineer at the Chernobyl plant at the time of the disaster in 1986. His wife was also an engineer at the plant, and she went missing around that time. So modern day, 35 years later, Igor's headed back to Chernobyl, trying to find out what happened to his wife. I'd say that Black Book took place in kind of a horror setting, but Chernobylite is definitely firmly a horror game. It's part of the intent is to frighten the player.
Did it frighten you?
It did. I'm pretty good with horror movies, but horror games kind of make me a little twitchy. So part of that may be because I'm a bit of a weakling, but
I relate.
I mean, I think all of us are weaklings when we are in the exclusionary zone surrounded by monsters. Yeah. I don't think you need to be the strongest. Even if you were the strongest person in the world, you're probably still going to be pretty scared. And hell, I would be scared if my radiation meter went off like just once.
Oh my god! it goes off a lot.
Did you play Stalker at all?
No,
barely. I'm barely aware of it. Okay, I booted it up a couple times. It's pretty. A lot of people were comparing Chernobylite to Stalker.
I've heard interesting contrasts and comparisons between the two, and that's what makes me interested because I like everyone else modded Stalker to within an inch of its life and played so much of it. That's one of the most atmospheric games that's ever been made, in my opinion. And Chernobylite looks like it's definitely got the atmosphere down. I don't know, from what you've said and your review and from what I've heard other people say, it sounds really good. But there's some really interesting differences. I guess Chernobylite's more about community building, right?
It is a bit. You do have a base and you collect companions.
Does anybody sit down around a campfire and play guitar?
No, not exactly.
Okay, well, that's okay. I mean, that's one of my favorite parts of Stalker.
Does anyone sit around a campfire and play accordion?
No, the accordion didn't make it to Chernobyl, I guess. Didn't make it to Ukraine.
The reason why I really am intrigued by this is because one of my favorite genre of YouTubers is abandoned places. I love abandoned places.
Oh,
YouTube
yeah,
videos.
Totally.
Oh, yeah.
They're just awesome. I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before. And I mean, obviously, there are a few holy grails of abandoned places. And one of them, of course, is Chernobyl. Because, it was abandoned, everyone left, so nature managed to take it over.
Weird. Why was Chernobyl abandoned?
I don't know. They probably all left on a picnic or vacation or something, and then they just forgot to come back.
They're
It's
like, you know
fine.
what? The next town over, like Pripyat's good and all. Next town over is a little better when they all decided at the same time.
But looking at these images, I am struck by how, I mean, obviously I've never been there, but it looks very authentic. It looks like a recreation of the area, and that is really interesting to me.
If people have time, you should check out their production diaries on Steam. The production team, probably against their better judgment, went to the exclusionary zone themselves and took photos and recreated a lot of sites that they found there.
Yeah, because this theme park looks spooky.
There is one interesting story about, I believe it was one of their photographers. When you go to the exclusionary zone, you apparently had to check in with actual stalkers so that they can tell you where to go, where not to go, how to stay safe. On one day when the crew is leaving the zone, everyone gets checked out for radiation, and one member of the production crew, his shoes were setting off the sensor, and so he had to leave his shoes there.
Oh my
God. It sounds like this crew definitely went the extra mile.
I hope they went on a bus afterwards or something. I hope he didn't have to like walk too much after that. That's wild.
But yeah, if you're interested in, I definitely recommend checking out the production diaries. It's interesting stuff.
Well, yeah, I remember the video I watched was Exploring with Josh, and he's a very, very active abandoned places YouTuber, and I'm looking at it right now. The thumbnail of of one of his Chernobyl videos is almost the exact screenshot of the theme park. Like it's identical, and that's really quite impressive.
We mentioned that this was a horror game, and certainly one of it's scary just walking around the buildings. Like if I was walking around Chernobyl during the day, I could probably go to the actual site and not feel too frightened, but at night, I don't think I would handle that very well. The Farm 51 also created a virtual walkthrough of Chernobyl. That's another thing that they produced out of their experiences working on this game.
Wow, they have like an academic bent to them. That's cool.
Yeah,
they looked at what the Assassin's Creed games were doing. They're like, we could do that just with a more recent disaster.
But yeah, it's scary enough walking through the dilapidated buildings, junk all over the floors. But then the game drops monsters in there. You can often hear them tromping around, or can hear their portal that they're coming out of open up. It might not even be next to you, but you know that they're in there, and you're gonna have to face them eventually. So that's pretty scary. That kind of gets my heart racing just thinking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for telling us about these two Eastern European games. I will keep an eye out for any more Eastern European games and be sure to give them to you as our Eastern European correspondent, apparently.
I'm sure I'll take them.
Yeah. So we were in with the devil, and then we were into like kind of sci-fi-esque horror. Why don't we do something a little bit lighter? Why don't we play some pinball? How about some pinball? Pete, have you been playing any pinball games lately?
Yeah, I've been playing World Flipper quite a bit.
World Flipper? What is that?
World Flipper. So World Flipper's mobile game has been out in Japan for I think around 2 years now. It just got released here, and it's a pinball RPG, and it's so much fun. So pretty much there is a story mode. It's very cute. There's it's candy. I wouldn't say it's like a 3-course meal, but it's really good candy. And the story is.
There is nothing wrong with candy.
Nothing. No, not a single thing. It's just a bunch of really cute characters, and it's a gacha game. So you're using currencies that you get for free if you choose to get them for free and have the time for it. And you pull characters. They're all adorable. I do wonder, like with Genshin Impact, it makes sense because there aren't that many characters, so they can make every character just utterly spectacular and breathtaking and full of like all kinds of charisma. But with these other games like World Flipper and other kind of gacha games with characters in them, I do really wonder what it takes to make so many characters so cute and so detailed. And with some of these games, there's like over 100 or like hundreds of characters. And so, this is no different. I don't know how many characters are in World Flipper, but they're all, really cute anime, really fun characters. And so the way it works is you build a party of 3 characters, and they are pretty much your lead character acts as the ball, and the other 2 trail behind it. And you're in these environments that you might find in an RPG, like a forest or like a castle or a dungeon or whatever. And there's little flippers at the bottom, and you kind of launch your characters up, and you attack enemies by hitting them. And so it's a pinball table that constantly changes as enemies get spawned in or as you destroy enemies. If you hit them before you come back down on your flippers, you build up a combo, and you can use that energy from the combo to unleash different special attacks. And then there's another tier of super, where just after so many hits, you're building up a meter. Once the meter gets full, you swipe in a certain direction, and you can use one of each of your 3 characters' abilities. They're mapped to a direction that you swipe. So like your lead character, you swipe up, your second one you swipe left, and your third one you swipe right to activate their special. And so like right now I have this robot, like this really dapper 3-piece suit wearing robot in my party. And his super is just like a beam cannon from Gundam or whatever. It's pretty awesome, where he'll just hit the nearest target. It's got really nice boss battles where they'll often summon a special attack, and while they're summoning it, a weak spot will appear, and if you hit them on the weak spot, it interrupts their cast and does extra damage. And it's really cool. I mean, the team building is really great. There's considerations of like elemental affinities. So if you're facing off against forest enemies, you might want to take like fire characters with you, or things like that. All your characters have different supers, and you attach other characters to one of your 3 characters. So each of your 3 characters in your party can have another kind of tag along character that doesn't appear on the screen, but they augment their abilities. So the first character you meet in this game has a meteor strike that just hits an area of effect. But if you pair him up with the forest archer lady that heals you, then the area of effect will do the damage, but it will also heal your whole party. So you can mix and match abilities that way. There's a lot of really neat team building stuff like that. It's really, it's much better. I mean, the game's been running for a long time, but somehow they managed to get a lot of mechanics and a lot of, I might say strategy. That might be a little generous, but we'll just say strategy for argument's sake. Out of a pinball game, it's great. I've never been that into pinball either, but this is a lot of fun.
The extent of my pinball playing was almost entirely the Windows 95 Rocket pinball game.
Oh, yeah.
The spaceship one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We all remember that.
Yeah, I think everyone played that. Although one of my favorite games on my phone when I'm just, I don't know, I guess not anymore, but whenever I was commuting or going on the subway or something like that, it was a pinball game called Ink. It was this beautiful game where it's a pinball game, but there would be like ink pads all over the board, and you'd have to explode them all to create like works of art. And it was super fun, but it was,
whoa, that's cool.
Yeah, but it was also very, very simplistic. So it sounds like these folks have taken just pinball mechanics and they have very smartly mapped RPG mechanics onto that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so aside from the characters you can like tag along with your party members, there's also a little bit of equipment. You can assign either 1 or 2 pieces of equipment. I don't remember that. That's just purely statistical. That's just like augments your stats in some way. But yeah, they do go pretty deep on the mechanical side. It is a mobile gacha game, so it's overwhelming at first. These games do tend to ease you into the mechanics a little bit. And I feel like this game has, for the most part, but really Genshin Impact trained me on like how to progress in a mobile game. So I think I brought some of that to this, and that's helped me. Because I don't know if I hadn't played a gacha game this much before, if I would have kind of as easy a time as I'm having parsing how to build my party. But as far as just playing it, it's really intuitive. You just tap the screen to move both the flippers, and depending on where your characters land on the flipper, it's just like pinball. There's some physics to it.
Yeah, it's a pinball game.
But there's also, while they're on the board, you can tap again and they'll dash. A little arrow will appear facing the nearest like hittable object, so usually an enemy, and you can tap it and have them dash to it. So that's how you get them like behind a boss to a weak point and hit it, and they'll just like pounce on the weak point. And so it does mess with the physics a little bit in that, and that does add a lot to the kind of arcade gameplay of it. There's some the bosses will often shoot out like bullet hell patterns, but of course you can't really do much to dodge them other than just launching your characters and doing the dash. But it's not as reliable as like dodging bullets in a bullet hell shooter. But there is some of that, so you could probably get really good with the mechanics on hand at some of those maneuvers. But yeah, I mean, it's really arcadey. It's it's super quick. Like each scenario will just last you like a minute and a half to 2 minutes, as far as I've played so far. And a lot of fun, and with a surprising amount of depth, and the team building is great.
It sounds like it has a very, I don't want to say addictive, but intriguing gameplay loop.
Yeah, I don't feel myself compelled to like push on and like keep playing. So I don't know if it's like, I mean, for someone it's going to be addictive, I'm sure, but I think I've dodged that bullet so far. But as a quick thing, if I'm like in line somewhere, like I might want to pull out Genshin Impact, but that might not be the best move. I'll pull out World Flipper and do something on that, and that's like guaranteed I'll be done with whatever I'm doing by the time I get to the front of the line, Yeah,
it gives you a quick hit rather than I don't know. I haven't played Genshin Impact, but I hear it's quite an expansive game.
Yeah.
From you, actually, I've heard that.
Yeah, that game's good. But this is good too. And I'm at the point now where I'm like doing my dailies on World Flipper before I do my dailies on Genshin Impact. And that's I don't know.
The first step to getting away from Genshin Impact?
You're funny. You are funny. Oh, that was a good one. Whew, thanks for that. I needed that laugh.
Here's the thing, Pete. If you want to break your addiction to Genshin Impact, you gotta play a game that's on like a modern console, something that's like cutting edge, something that beats all of the rest of the consoles. Something that has a number in it.
Maybe something that does like 3D.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Oh, yeah.
So there's another game that you've been playing, which you told me you were playing this, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. And I don't think we can spend too much time on it, but sure. I did want to ask you a few questions about it. So tell me, what are you playing right now on the legendary console 3DO?
Yeah, 3DO is the latest thing. I'm on I'm always on the cutting edge.
Yeah, I know. The people with the SNES and the Genesis, they're just shaking and just thinking, ooh, the lucky devil.
Yeah, they are saying that I'm very lucky. I have heard that from them. That I have the 3DO.
The only way you could be lucky is if you had a Jaguar.
Let's not get crazy. No, I'm playing this game on my 3DO called Immersionary. And it's a first-person cyberpunk RPG. It's a first-person shooter RPG hybrid. Their stats, you're leveling up your stats.
Well, this is very intriguing to me because this is the first time I've ever heard that 3DO has games.
Yeah, well, it's got at least 3. I can personally vouch that it has 3 games, at least. And Mercenary is one of the best ones. I'm having a killer time with this game. It's an open world 3D first-person game. The opening introduction to the game has FMV that like really works for me. I think it's actually pretty good direction and acting, and they do a bunch of silly 90s stuff with it. Like they separate the characters into panels and they'll like say their line and then it'll switch to the other panel like on the screen, almost like that Hulk movie that tried to be a comic book that Ang Lee directed. Kind of a similar-ish idea, much less sophisticated, but it kind of worked for me. I kind of thought it was cool. And the actors are not bad, and then they bring you into this facility and they jack you into this virtual world, like basically unceremoniously. The game opens with you seeing the guy before you, who they call number 4, die in the chair, like in the Matrix chair, right? And then so he dies. They stretcher him out, and you come in and they're like, okay, number 5, you're up, and they just jack you into cyberspace, and the whole game takes place in there, and the world I would describe it as something like Second Life, like a kind of a Second Life type thing. So I think this program was supposed to be a virtual world like a Second Life type thing, but it's just gone completely to hell, and it's just open warfare. And so when you're walking around, all the enemies are all fighting each other. and they're also fighting you. So it makes it feel very, very lively. It play in the city. There's like distinct districts. Like there's like a cemetery, there's a park, there's an industrial district. It's pretty well realized, but it's very surrealistic. It's like a bizarro version of a city. And the game is full of really great puns, usually of like a computer-y nature. So when you enter for the first time, you're rank 255, and your mission is to get to rank 2 and then kill Perfect 1, who is number 1 and also in charge of everything in this virtual world. So you can, I guess, free everyone who's trapped inside. I don't know, something like that. And so you're rank 255, and obviously like 256 is like, I don't know, a computer number, you know? And you gain rank just by killing other kind of avatars in the world. It plays like a bad Doom. So you control almost like you're on a vehicle. So you like accelerate and decelerate in reverse with the up and down buttons. And yeah, the combat's all based on like locking onto enemies, and it almost never works. It's kind of a nightmare, honestly. But then in the middle, you have 3 stats. Your RPG stats are defense, offense, and agility. So it's DOA. And then in the middle of the city, there's a place called DOA-SYS. So it's DOASIS, which is great, right? And it's like a no-fire zone where when you enter it, all your stats get healed up. But you see all of the enemies there with you, or at least some of them, not all of them. And you can go up and talk to them. So then it's like an adventure game type thing where you can talk to them and you can gain information about the world and about other enemies, maybe clues about how to defeat them. Some of them will tell you where to find some items. And so it's absolutely bonkers, and I'm kind of thrilled about it. Like, I think it's a really cool game that did a lot of stuff. It was published by EA and developed by this company called 5 Miles Out, and this was the only game they did, and they disappeared.
As did many other people that were involved in the 3DO.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not going to make fun. I'm going to make fun of the 3DO probably quite a bit more in this, but but it's fascinating to me that the 3DO was not released, and it wasn't like it was expected to be a failure. Like companies like 5 Miles Out and lots of other people, they put a lot of work into these games and this system, and it obviously didn't work on any conceivable level because it was costing too much money. The technology wasn't there yet. Lots and lots and lots of reasons. But it seems like a lot of talented people were involved in this system and with this game.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it was they called it the first 32-bit system, you know, and it might have done okay if it didn't launch at $700 in like 1993. $3, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But no, definitely, I mean, this was a Trip Hawkins thing, who was the Electronic Arts guy, right? I think I got that right. I think I have every part of that thing I just said lined up the right way. And so therefore a lot of Electronic Arts published games were on it. So a lot of quality games that were elsewhere did end up on the 3DO in some way or another. There's like a version of FIFA. There's also like some of the best home console versions at the time of Street Fighter 2 and Samurai Showdown are on the 3DO. They're almost arcade perfect at the time. There was a really good version of Road Rash, which was basically like the Windows 95 version of Road Rash.
Yeah, this game itself was very well reviewed in its time. It was between, like, generally it looks like it was between an 80 and 90 was what people were thinking of it.
At the time, there was almost nothing like it, especially like in first person and with a seamless open world where you can go anywhere. You know, it's like, yeah, I would rate it highly right now. Like all of its quirks and everything. I think that this, unfortunately, for a long time was one of the games that was difficult to run by other means because this is a 3DO exclusive. So I don't know if by now they figured that out. I am playing it on a 3DO, but I mean, I think if there were a way for someone to play it, it's a cool curiosity. I mean, I would say it's more than a curiosity. I think there's a lot of really great things about it. It can be really intense. The characters are really interesting. Sometimes they're a little bit offensive. I got to admit.
It was 1995.
It was 1995. But the characters are really interesting. There's just the concept itself of so just some of the details around the edges are super. They help flesh out in your imagination what this world might be. Like the fodder enemies are called goners because they're supposed to be people who are like almost completely absorbed in the program and are maybe like almost dead in real life or something. And they're called goners because they're goners, but it's also with one N because they're polygoners, because they're like disembodied, weird, disconnected polygons, vaguely in the shape of a humanoid. You know what I mean?
I do actually. Oh man.
It's so good. And the game does stuff like this all the time. And it is really silly, but it works for me. I think it's great. Like I'll take all the dumbest puns, like DOASIS. I love it's the Oasis.
The fact that DOA appeared in this game for the 3DO is like, DOA, dead on arrival.
Right.
Huh.
Yes, another good pun. Defense, offense, agility, and dead on arrival. And the gameplay, honestly, with all of its weirdness, can get like I'm constantly like my heart rate is constantly going up in a good way. It's really thrilling if you can.
I mean, if I paid $700 for a 3DO, my heart rate would probably be going up too.
Yeah, well, yes, even in 2021 dollars. But I often see my life gauge, my D, right, the defense, hitting, ticking down because I'm getting hit. And since you're in a city, there's often buildings nearby, so I've found it effective to. It feels real. It feels real to like duck in an alleyway, like get out of there, duck in an alleyway, and like try to find a relatively safe spot for just a second, and look around you for like these recovery towers that exist in the world. That when you stand by them, they recover whatever stat they represent. So it can get really intense, and sometimes it's frustrating. Sure, the controls are objectively bad, but somehow they get kind of the action part of it down too. And also just the fact that you can talk to the enemies, and sometimes they're really friendly to you in the Oasis. It's almost like, yeah, we're all just stuck here, so if we don't have to fight each other, we might as well be cordial to each other or something.
That's neat. It sounds like it has some elements of, there were a lot of things in the mid 90s that were kind of obsessed with this whole living in a computer thing. Like I'm not even going to remotely pretend that I did not love Reboot when I was a kid.
Reboot is awesome.
Reboot is awesome. Reboot is amazing.
Reboot looks a lot better than Immercenary visually too.
I didn't want to say anything, but yeah.
Absolutely it does.
Reboot was great. It did not deserve its reboot, but that's another story.
Yeah, I vaguely remember like the Lawnmower Man. If you remember the extremely 90s computer graphics from that movie.
The front cover of Immercenary, if you look it up, is basically like a Lawnmower Man in like an exosuit, but it's all chrome, like just like Lawnmower Man.
It is something that probably took approximately 3.5 months to render.
Yeah. They built that out, hit render, and came back came back on Monday.
Well, thank you both for taking us through that and talking about the games that you've been playing. Before we go, I kind of want to drop in a little bit and talk about the PlayStation presentation that just happened a couple of days ago, because a lot of games got announced and a few games that were specifically right in RPG fans' wheelhouse. And I don't know, I just want to talk about what your thoughts about them, if you're excited about them. I think the one that, there were a lot of games that got a lot of people really excited, but the one that just knocked me over in my chair was Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic Remake, announced for PlayStation 5.
But that's an Xbox game, though.
Not anymore. This is something I missed when it first came out, and a few years ago when Boss Fight Books released their book about the making of, and I actually reviewed the book for the site, and for fun, I did a retro review of the game, and I just loved it. I thought it was amazing. I thought it was the best piece of Star Wars that I've seen or played in years, and I think that a lot of people at the time felt the same way. And the fact that it's getting a remake, because it's very, very good, but even when it's modded out, it still feels a little dated. But the remake is announced. We don't know if it's going to be an RPG yet. Apparently some original team members are involved, but it could be an RPG. They could go full action. I don't know. Have either of you two played KotOR or anything like it?
Oh yeah, that was one of the main reasons I bought the original Xbox. So it's pretty ironic that it's now a Sony exclusive.
I've only played a little bit of it, to be honest. It's one of the things on my pile of shame. But yeah, I played Dragon Age. I played other like late BioWare stuff. So yeah, I'm interested. certainly am interested.
Yeah, I really have my fingers crossed that this is going to be an RPG, because this is the kind of thing that I would love to cover for the site. It's such a fantastic story. And even though, see, the $1 million question is, will they actually keep the story as is, because it's pretty darn iconic, and the twist in it, the I am your father moment in it is famous now. It's one of the biggest twists in video games. But will they do that again? Will they give it another twist? Will they play around with that? That's the question. Like, are they going to do a straight ahead remake, or are they going to go a little bit Final Fantasy VII remake with it and really change things up?
I mean, I'd imagine they'd probably want to leave the story mostly intact. It would be the gameplay that I would think would be the thing that might get a refresher. You know, I could think of, getting in more of a, say like a Mass Effect style of gameplay. I don't know if that would work very well, but I could definitely see them going a little bit more actiony, because the old game, it was pretty much based on like a Dungeons and Dragons sort of system, I think, right?
Yeah, I loved it, but it could be pretty slow at times.
There's got to be RPG elements in it, like ever since there's precedent that of RPG mechanics almost certainly being in this remake that go all the way back to like Jedi Knight and Jedi Knight 2, which were action games that had a stat element to it. So even if they do go more actiony, there's got to be some stat. I mean, I would be surprised if there weren't some kind of player progression, some kind of mechanical, complexity to it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, after Final Fantasy Remake, though, speaking of the story, I mean, that might set a precedent of remakes, of people being more willing to subvert the story. I'm with Abe. I don't think they will, but I mean, now we have a precedent of them doing that and fooling with the story of an old game. So,
well, we'll see what happens with it. Another game that a lot of people on the site have been looking forward to was Forspoken. And when this particular trailer came out and we got a little bit more insight into the game, it was a bit of it. I don't want to say a letdown, but it was a little bit. I think I have the pronunciation right. Isekai, that's it. Where it's a game where like person from the real world falls through a magical portal and ends up in a fantasy land. Like when it first popped up, my first thought was, oh wow, we're getting another trailer for Stranger in Paradise. And then it turned out to be Forspoken. Like to the point where I just wanted her to say chaos just once in the trailer, just to troll the audience.
Yeah, I think this is a character that could have been very charming. Maybe she is. But yeah, like the whole like there's a freaking dragon is like, all right, like, I don't know if this is the right move necessarily. There was like 3 God of War games shown basically, and this was one of them, right? Like, I don't know. It looks really beautiful. And as I don't know if I told you guys this actually, but I played this game. I think it's called Genshin Impact. As a Genshin Impact player, there was like some elemental stuff she was doing that had me kind of putting my hand on my chin in a pensive way. So maybe there's cool stuff there with like magic and stuff, but I'd have to see more.
Yeah, I still have hope for it, but I have to admit that it's not my favorite kind of story genre. I just don't have much of an interest in it, to be completely honest.
Yeah, I don't think the story registered with me particularly very much at all.
Let's see.
Yeah, we'll see, I guess.
Yeah, we'll see.
Another one that got some attention was Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, which looks to be a Borderlands love letter to D&D. It was announced a couple of months ago, and we finally got a look at the game, and it looks a hell of a lot like Borderlands.
It's Borderlands, baby!
Yeah, it's Borderlands. If you love Borderlands, you're probably going to love this game. The $1 million question for me is how many actual role-playing mechanics are going to be making it into this game? Because the whole central conceit of the game is that it's just Tiny Tina playing a tabletop RPG. But will they work those mechanics into the actual game? Will there be a progression system, a leveling system?
I mean, those always were in Borderlands, those kinds of things, the gaining of skills and the progression, those have been in Borderlands. So
they've been in Borderlands, but I would argue that if they're doing a love letter to D&D, I think that they should really lean into some of those mechanics.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they will or not. It'll be interesting to see if they do.
I mean, the party walked by a giant 12-sided die, and that was pretty cute. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm not sure what they have up their sleeve with that one. It seems like it's going to be Borderlands. Hey, there was some like magic that they were showing again. There was a big monster that they turned into like a cute spectral being that just ran away. Who, I don't know. Yeah, well, I'll keep my eye open on that one. I thought it was pretty cute looking, but yeah, as far as whether or not we're going to cover it here, that'll be interesting to see.
And I mean, there were some other games, but for me, the big one that I don't care if it's an RPG or not, I'm still going to mention it. Deathloop looks so damn good.
Deathloop, baby. Yeah. Arcane is back.
I'm ready for it.
I am so ready for this game. It comes out, as of recording, it's going to be coming out tomorrow. And it is a game that I think a lot of people are desperate to play. I love Dishonored. I wish there were more RPG mechanics in it so we could cover it, but there's not. And there's not in this game, and I don't care. I'm going to be spending my hard-earned time playing Deathloop.
Yep, me too.
Dishonored mechanics in a Groundhog Day-esque scenario with this aesthetic. It's catnip for me. I can't help but play it. I'm very excited. It just looks incredible.
Yeah, it's it's kind of exciting to see more mainstream games adopting roguelike elements. I remember there's something from earlier this year that was kind of an action game that was kind of roguelike-y in space or something. I don't remember what that game was called, but it's exciting to see the kind of mechanics from more like hardcore style games making their ways into mainstream games.
Well, since we're kind of on that, and I kind of transitioned to it with Deathloop, this is a discussion question. I'm not going to go deep into your histories with games or anything like we usually do for discussion questions. I'm just going to ask you a nice, simple, right over the plate question, which is, what is a game that's coming out this year, or maybe early next year, that you are super excited for? It doesn't need to be an RPG. It could be anything. Just what is something that when you see it, it just makes you go, oh, yes, please.
I mean, Shin Megami Tensei 5 is in November. I just played a game where you spend a lot of time dealing with demons in a very different way than you do in Shin Megami Tensei games. But you always got to look forward to those games. I mean, it's a staple. It's a JRPG staple at this point.
Yeah, and this one looks like it's going to blow the roof off the place.
Yeah, the art, the characters, it looks pretty amazing. A huge step from the previous games in the series.
Yeah, I'm very curious if they're going to be pulling some of the lessons that they learned with Persona 5 and into this one. And I imagine they would.
Maybe. I'm guessing it's probably still going to be 100 hours long, though.
Yeah, and hopefully we get it with plenty of time to spare for the review.
That'd be nice, yeah.
Pete, how are you feeling? What are you looking forward to?
I actually can't think of off the top of my head of when this is supposed to come out. It might be 2022, so I'm sorry if I'm bending the rules. But speaking of what we were talking about before, there's a new Stalker game coming out.
Yeah, I believe it's April.
Oh, is it that soon? Oh, no.
I think so.
Okay.
Who knows if that'll stick, but...
Time to upend my life. I mean, it's like a year. It's like, what, 8 months from now, 7 months from now? It's fine. Yeah. It seems like they understood what makes Stalker so amazing. Now, it's just a trailer, and they did open that trailer with like basically a Call of Duty sequence. But as it went on, you got to see more and more of what makes that game so special. And I'll briefly mention something I'm excited about, just not necessarily for myself, but in general, is MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries, after having just got an Xbox release, is getting a PlayStation release too.
Oh, yeah.
So MechWarrior 5 is going to be out on PlayStation, and that's really cool to think. The trailer, so I just wasn't thinking I'd bring this up, but there was recently a big update for MechWarrior 5 that like blew up a whole bunch of mods and like caused a lot of trouble for a lot of people who were making really good mods for that game. Mm-hmm. And the trailer for the PlayStation release showed that they might be implementing melee combat, so you can like punch with your mechs and hit other mechs with it. And some of the people in some of the discords of the mods that I use for my copy of MechWarrior 5 are like sweating bullets. Like, are they going to break this game again? So some excitement, some trepidation for that one. But yeah, I mean, it's overall, I'm happy it's going to be basically everywhere.
Cool. Well, mine is Metroid Dread. Mike Salvato and I have been talking about it, and both of us are just like over the moon excited about this because, I mean, I know that we only cover the Vania side of Metroidvania on this site, but holy, if there was ever a game that makes me wish that we covered the Metroid side of Metroidvania, it's Well,
Would that be Metroid?
Yeah, it's a friggin' 2D Metroid game, and I mean that's really, really difficult not to be super excited about.
It looked really cool. I love a persistent enemy that chases you throughout the game. I love that.
It looks like what they were trying to do with Fusion, but using modern technology, so they can actually like track you down, and hopefully they have better AI.
Sure, they will.
AI is 2021. AI is great. Well, thank you both for being on this episode. I really appreciate it and really love talking to you guys about some games. Please come on again at some point in the future. And I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping before we wrap things up. So if you had a good time listening to us this week, or you just like random in general and you think, boy, I sure wish that I had something to listen to when I was driving, we have a massive backlog of random episodes. We've been running continuously now for 11 years, which is absolutely insane. There are no signs of stopping. We will be keeping going as long as they make video games. We are going to be covering them, hopefully. But we also have other podcasts on the site. If you love retro games, I highly suggest that you check out Retro Encounter. That's hosted by our very own Mike Solosi. Every week, he and a panel of RPG staffers, they dive into the games of yesterday with the perspective of today. And I've been on a few episodes recently. I'm going to be on a few more episodes in the future. Again, can't ruin any of them, because Mike Solosi is a mastermind. But I will say that we have some exciting episodes coming up in the future. We also have Rhythm Encounter, which is RPG Fans' music podcast. It's going to be every second Monday. It's going to be alternating with us here on Random every week. And Rhythm examines the music of video games from every perspective. Next week is going to be a Final Fantasy XIV episode, because we are legally obligated to say Final Fantasy XIV on every episode of Random, whether we have an excuse to or not. But in this case, we have some very big Final Fantasy XIV fans on staff, so it's actually going to be an amazing episode. I just finished editing it. I have not played this game, much to the chagrin of many people on staff, but I will tell you this, the music is incredible. So it's definitely one that you want to listen to. And finally, we have our partner podcast, Phoenix Edge, and they usually cover like news and stuff like that. But last week they did something really, really interesting, and they did an in-depth interview with some of the folks behind the indie RPG studio Something Classic about their new retro-inspired RPG Quartet. And this looks to be, if you like retro-style RPGs, this looks to be an absolutely incredible game. But specifically, this episode is a fascinating look at what goes into designing a game that delivers a modern twist on retro ideas, especially for RPGs. So if you are in any way intrigued by retro-style RPGs, this is an episode I think you really want to check out. They did a really, really good job on it. It was a fascinating bunch of interviews. If you'd like to get in contact with us here at Random Encounter, you can fire us off a message at podcastrpgfan.com. I would love to hear from you if you have ideas for future episodes, if you have ideas for discussion questions, anything else you'd like to share, please drop us a line. If you want to talk to me directly, you can do so at jlogan@rpgfan.com, or you can find me on Twitter at Jono_Logan. I think that I've been saying that wrong for like the last 150 episodes, but it is at Jono_Logan, not at Jono Logan. So that's my Twitter, Jono_Logan. But I don't think that anyone else has that much trouble actually knowing where they can be found. So, Abe, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Babe Moby, BABEMOBY.
There's no underscore in between that. It's just Babe Moby, right?
No underscores. I keep things simple. Yeah.
You're a smart man. And Pete, where can we find you?
On Twitter, I'm Pete Barbero1. On Twitch, I'm RG Halfpenny. I've been streaming MechWarrior 5. I've been streaming some Immercenary actually lately too, now that I have my setup kind of coming together a little bit. Shoot, that's it, I guess. Yeah, Twitter, I guess if you're dying to get a hold of me, you can find me there, Pete Barbero1.
Well, thank you both for being on this episode. I really, really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone listening, for joining us. So we're going to be back in 2 weeks with another random. Maybe Greg might be here. It all depends on whether or not he has been pulling his hair out. Greg is telling me that he's old now and he's tired. So we'll see. No, he's not even remotely. Well, he is 37, so I'm 37. How old are you guys?
I'm 37.
Oh, God, we're all old. Yeah. Oh, that was another thing, Pete. Delightful thing that you as a barber will know. I, again, hadn't got my hair cut for 2 years, got my hair cut, and I was like, holy crap, my temples are completely gray, and I did not expect that at all.
Top 25 best things to ever happen to you. Don't worry about it. Embrace it. It's beautiful.
No, it's good. I'm Reed Richardsing it up right now, so I'm
Yes.
pleased with it. Anyway, thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Play on.
Good night.
Later.